The sun dipped low beneath the jagged horizon of Zelthar 6, casting the dusty landscape in a soft, golden hue. The vast plains stretched endlessly, cracked and barren, dotted only by the occasional rusted structure from the long-abandoned mining colony. The wind howled, picking up sand and dust, creating spirals that seemed to mock the world's stillness. For human ex-soldier Riley Carter, this was just another alien world. Another world where the quietude of peace felt more oppressive than the chaos of war. But Riley wasn't one to complain. He'd learned long ago that complaining didn't win you battles or friends, especially on a planet where humanity's place was always questioned. Riley squatted in the shadow of a crumbling wall, his back pressed against the cold metal of an abandoned building. His eyes scanned the horizon, ever watchful. He was one of the last remaining humans on Zelthar 6, a species that had been exiled from the Galactic Defense Academy after being labeled too unpredictable, too dangerous, too human. But humans like Riley had something that no algorithm could predict, something no model could account for, a drive to survive, to adapt, and to win against all odds. "Riley, you there?" The voice of his alien companion crackled through his comms, breaking the silence. Riley's lips twitched into a slight grin as he adjusted his earpiece. "Yeah, I'm here, Drax. What's up?" Drax was a Zarian, a species that looked like a cross between a feline and a reptile, with sharp claws and scales that shimmered under the twin suns of the planet. He was the brains of their operation, while Riley was the muscle. The Zarians were the intellectuals of the galaxy, capable of processing vast amounts of data in seconds. They were supposed to be the galaxy's greatest tacticians, but they didn't understand humans. "Riley, we've got a problem," Drax said, his voice tinged with concern. "The supply ship was intercepted, no survivors." Riley's heart sank. The galaxy was a cruel place for a human soldier. Their supplies were limited, their allies few. And when the Zarian authorities found out the ship was carrying critical supplies for the Resistance, well, they might as well have handed over a death sentence. "Where did the attack come from?" Riley asked, his voice low, controlled. "An unknown faction," Drax replied. "No markings, no communications. It's like they didn't want us to know who they were." Riley stood up, dusting off his combat pants. He didn't need to ask who they were. The Zarian High Command had been clear about their disapproval of the Earth Marines. Riley's people had been exiled, cast aside as too unpredictable. But now, the galaxy was starting to realize that humanity's unpredictability was their greatest asset. "I'll go check it out," Riley said, already pulling his helmet on. He could feel the cold steel of his rifle against his back, a constant reminder of the battles he had fought and the ones yet to come. "Be careful," Drax warned. "We don't know who we're up against." Riley nodded, more to himself than to his alien companion. "I'm always careful." The first step into the unknown was always the hardest. But Riley Carter was no stranger to uncertainty. He had been trained to survive, to push through the impossible. And when the enemy least expected it, that's when he struck. As he moved across the desolate landscape, the wind began to pick up, swirling around him in gusts of sand. The path ahead was dark and unclear, but Riley knew that where the light dimmed, that was where the truth often waited. Riley's boots crunched against the rocky terrain as he moved forward, the dim glow of the two moons casting long shadows across the barren plains. His comms remained silent, the eerie hum of the wind and the distant screeching of a creature in the night the only sounds accompanying him. The sun had set and the air had turned cold, carrying with it the biting reminder that time was slipping away. Drax's warning echoed in his mind. "We don't know who we're up against." But Riley didn't need to know everything, not yet. He had reached a small, hidden outpost by the time the second moon crested the horizon, casting pale light over the cluster of structures. It was a resistance base, a place where those who still fought for freedom could find refuge. But there were whispers in the galaxy now, whispers about humans, whispers that Earth Marines didn't follow the rules. They didn't behave like anyone expected them to. They didn't fight like anyone else. "Riley," a voice called from the shadows as he approached the entrance. It was Vala, a Valerian woman with striking silver eyes and a reputation for being as fierce as she was intelligent. "You're late." "I had to make sure we weren't being followed," Riley said as he crouched beside her. He could see the suspicion in her eyes. The humans were always under suspicion, even when they fought for the same cause. "Good, we've got intel," Vala said, handing him a data pad. "It's not good, though." Riley's brow furrowed as he scanned the screen. The data was sparse, but it was clear. The supply ship had been attacked by a faction that didn't follow the usual playbook. They had used tactics no one had anticipated, blending guerrilla warfare with high-tech precision, leaving no trace of their presence. Whoever they were organized, efficient, and lethal. This doesn't make sense, Riley muttered, scanning the data again. No one's supposed to be able to pull this off. Vala's gaze softened as she saw the confusion on his face. It's what you're afraid of, isn't it? That someone will outthink the Earth Marines. Riley glanced at her, his mind racing. The thought had crossed his mind. The Earth Marines were a wild card, a force that couldn't be predicted or measured, and that had made them both a blessing and a curse in the eyes of the galaxy. But now, for the first time in his life, Riley wondered if that reputation might not be enough. "Who are they?" he asked, his voice quieter now. "We don't know," Vala replied, "but whoever they are, they know how to strike where it hurts, and I think they're hunting us." The weight of her words hit him hard. The resistance was already on the run, and now, with the Earth Marines' reputation on the line, they had to act fast before this mysterious faction got any closer. "Then we make them regret it," Riley said, his voice steady with purpose. "We hit them first." Vala nodded. "Prepare yourself, this fight is unlike anything you've faced." But Riley didn't need preparation. He had been trained for this moment. He didn't fight with precision. He didn't fight with a plan. He fought because he had no other choice. And that, he knew, was exactly what made the Earth Marines so unpredictable. As the night wore on, Riley and Vala gathered a team of resistance fighters. They weren't soldiers, not like him. But they had the same resolve, the same fire that had driven Riley to fight for so many years. They were desperate, fighting for their homes, their families, their way of life. Riley's heart pounded as they moved out under the cover of darkness, slipping through the ruins of Zelthar 6. The further they traveled, the more he realized that they weren't just running toward the enemy. They were running toward the unknown. By the time they reached the target location, the first hints of dawn were breaking, casting a faint light on the jagged silhouette of an ancient city. The buildings were half collapsed, the remains of a once great civilization long lost to time. Now, the ruins were a hideout for the unknown faction that had attacked the supply ship. The team crouched behind a broken wall, scanning the area. Riley's eyes narrowed as he observed the strange, high-tech equipment littered across the battlefield. Advanced weaponry, alien tech, things he had never seen before. "There's something off about this," Riley muttered under his breath. Vala's eyes glinted with concern. "They've set up defenses. We're walking straight into their trap." "Not if we hit them first," Riley replied, his jaw set with determination. Before they could make their move, the first blast rang out, a blinding streak of light that tore through the air, crashing into the ruins around them. It sent them scrambling for cover, but Riley knew they'd already been spotted. A high-pitched screeching sound filled the air as figures cloaked in dark, camouflaged armor moved swiftly across the battlefield. They were everywhere, fast, agile, and deadly. Riley's hand tightened around his rifle. "Move out," he shouted, leading the charge. They sprinted through the ruins, the sound of gunfire echoing in their ears as the resistance fighters followed. Riley's heart raced, adrenaline coursing through his veins as he darted between cover, firing at the enemy. Every movement felt like instinct, like he'd done this 1,000 times before. But then something shifted. The enemy wasn't just reacting, they were anticipating their moves. Riley's eyes widened as he saw one of the attackers step out of the shadows, a tall, imposing figure with a helmet that reflected the morning light. This wasn't just a random attack. This was a coordinated assault. "They're ready for us," Riley muttered, realizing just how far the enemy had gone to prepare for this moment. They knew who the resistance was, they knew who he was. And they had been waiting. Riley signaled the team to fall back, the realization hitting him hard. This was more than just a raid. The enemy was out for something deeper. They weren't after supplies, they were hunting them, strategically eliminating anyone who might pose a threat. "We can't take them head on," Riley said, his mind racing. "We need to disrupt their supply lines. If we can cut them off, we might stand a chance." Vala shot him a look. "They've already anticipated that. They've got backup." "I know," Riley said, his voice sharp. "Which is why we'll hit them harder. We're not just soldiers, we're Earth Marines." He turned to his team. "Form up. We're going in under the radar. Drax, get the comms back online. We need to know where their reinforcements are coming from. Everyone else, stay sharp." The team nodded, positioning themselves for the next move. Riley couldn't shake the feeling that the enemy knew more about them than they should. They weren't just a bunch of resistance fighters. They were a carefully crafted, methodical force. This wasn't a random skirmish. This was a calculated move, one that had been planned long before they'd even arrived. As the first few blasts of enemy fire ricocheted off the ruins, Riley made a snap decision. He didn't need to wait for confirmation. He knew this was their only shot. "Get ready, we hit them fast and hard," he barked. And with that, the team launched forward into the heart of the ruins, fully aware that they were walking into the jaws of a much larger threat than they had originally anticipated. The ruins of Zelthar 6 stretched out in all directions, a labyrinth of broken buildings, shattered stone, and the cold remnants of a lost civilization. The distant hum of the enemy's energy shields buzzed through the air, a constant reminder that Riley and his team were not alone. The enemy was close. They were watching, waiting. And the closer they got to the heart of the ruins, the more Riley could feel the weight of their presence. "Stay sharp," Riley muttered, his voice barely audible over the wind. "They've got us in their sights. We're not just fighting for supplies anymore. We're fighting to survive." The team moved silently, using the ancient stone structures as cover, their footsteps muffled by the cracked pavement beneath them. Every corner they turned, every shadow they passed, felt like a trap waiting to spring. Riley knew the risks, but this wasn't his first mission. It wasn't even his 100th. He had been in worse situations before, facing enemies who outgunned, outnumbered, and outclassed him. But Riley knew one thing: when it came down to it, the Earth Marines didn't follow the rules. And that was their greatest strength. Suddenly, a series of sharp, high-pitched shrieks shattered the silence. Riley's heart skipped a beat as he recognized the sound of the enemy's attack drones. They were here. "Move, move, move!" Riley shouted, springing to his feet and dashing toward the nearest building. The rest of the team followed suit, weapons raised, hearts pounding. Blasts of energy fire tore through the air, scorching the ruins and sending plumes of dust into the sky. Riley's hand tightened on his rifle as he returned fire, his shots pinpointing enemy soldiers hiding behind broken pillars. They were fast, but they weren't as fast as Riley, not when it came to improvisation. "Cover me," Riley shouted to Vala, who was covering their left flank. He dashed across the open ground, sprinting for the crumbling doorway of an ancient building that might provide shelter. The enemy fire was relentless, but Riley was faster, dodging blasts with precise, unpredictable movements. He reached the doorway just as another blast hit the ground where he had been standing moments before. The air sizzled with heat as he ducked into the building, finding temporary refuge. Vala, still covering him, fired a few well-placed shots before retreating into the doorway with the rest of the team. "They're everywhere," Vala said, breathless. "We're not going to make it out of here alive if we don't do something about their air support." Riley's mind raced. They needed to take out the drones. If they didn't, they wouldn't stand a chance. But doing so meant putting themselves in the line of fire. The Earth Marines were known for their adaptability, but even they couldn't always dodge a rain of plasma fire from the sky. "All right," Riley said, his eyes scanning the building for anything that could give them an advantage. "Drax, can you hack into their comms? I need to know where their drones are coming from." "I'll try," Drax replied, his voice calm despite the chaos. The Zarian was at the back of the team, his fingers working rapidly over a small data pad, his long claws tapping against the screen. Riley didn't wait for a full answer. He knew that if they were going to survive, they needed to take the fight to the enemy. "Vala, cover me. I'm going after the drones." The Valerian nodded, her eyes narrowing as she adjusted her rifle and aimed at the incoming enemy forces. "Don't do anything stupid, Riley." Riley gave her a grin, though it was more to reassure himself than anything. "Stupid is my middle name." Without another word, he dashed out of cover, heading for the tall spire at the center of the ruins, where he suspected the enemy's command center was located. His heart raced, adrenaline coursing through his veins as he sprinted across the battlefield. The drones were circling overhead, their sharp, metallic forms darting through the air, hunting for targets. Their targeting systems locked onto him, their weapons primed and ready. Riley dove into a nearby structure, narrowly avoiding a blast from one of the drones. He gritted his teeth as the heat from the explosion singed his armor, but the burn was nothing compared to the stakes of the mission. The drones had to go down. Drax, where are their signal sources? Riley shouted, his voice steady despite the chaos surrounding him. 2 clicks to your left, Drax replied. That's their communication hub. If you can disable it, their drones will go blind. Riley nodded, his eyes narrowing as he calculated his next move. He had done this before, hacking enemy systems, breaking through their defenses. It was a risk, but it was the only way to level the playing field. With no time to waste, Riley sprinted toward the comm hub, his rifle raised, scanning the area for enemy soldiers. He reached the base of the tower and quickly began setting up an explosive charge. His hands moved with precision, even as the drone's targeting systems locked onto him. The countdown on his detonator flashed in the corner of his visor. 5 seconds, Riley muttered to himself. Come on, come on. He pressed the final button, setting the charge in place. Just as he turned to make his escape, a drone blasted a hole in the wall behind him. The force sent him sprawling to the ground, the explosion knocking the wind out of him. Riley, Vala's voice crackled over the comms, panic evident in her tone. Get out of there. He forced himself to his feet, gritting his teeth against the pain. His vision swam for a moment, but he focused. The charge was set. The drones were almost blind. Now he just had to make it out alive. As he ran toward the exit, the explosion detonated behind him, sending a shockwave through the ruins. The walls of the structure shook, and the sound of the drone's engines sputtered. For a brief moment, everything went quiet. Riley reached the team's position, panting for breath. We've got them, he said, wiping the sweat from his brow. Their drones are down. Vala exhaled in relief, lowering her rifle. That was too close. Riley nodded. They're still out there, but we've got a chance now. The dust from the explosion still hung in the air, a choking haze that clung to the wreckage around them. Riley's heart was still pounding in his chest, adrenaline coursing through his veins as the team reformed and moved forward. The drones were down, but that was only one part of the fight. The real battle was still ahead, and now Riley knew they had to deal with the true force behind the attack. Keep your heads down, Riley ordered, his voice low and steady. We need to get to their command center before they regroup. Vala and the rest of the team nodded, moving cautiously through the rubble, rifles raised and ready. Riley led them, the weight of his experience pressing down on him with every step. They had taken down the drones, but there were still enemy soldiers out there, and they would be expecting retaliation. As they neared the command center, Riley's instincts flared. This place wasn't just a military installation, it was a fortress. The defenses had been set up too efficiently. It felt almost deliberate. Someone knew they were coming. Someone had planned this with the utmost precision. Something's not right, Riley muttered under his breath, glancing around. Vala caught his eye, her silver gaze sharp. You feel it too, don't you? Riley nodded. Whoever's behind this knew exactly how to bait us. They set up everything to lure us here, but why? What are they after? The silence that followed was deafening, and for the first time, Riley felt the weight of their uncertainty pressing in on them. It wasn't just about fighting anymore. They were up against something much bigger than they had anticipated. Let's just get inside, Riley said, trying to push the nagging feeling out of his mind. We need to find their leader. The entrance to the command center was heavily fortified, the thick, reinforced door almost impossible to breach without the right equipment. Riley's team huddled behind cover, rifles trained on the entrance as he scanned for an alternative route. The heavy blaster fire from the enemy could be heard in the distance, but it was clear that their forces were trying to fall back, regrouping for the inevitable counterattack. Riley wasn't about to let them have the advantage. Vala, he said, glancing at the Valerian. Get to the control panel. I need you to disable the main door's locking system. Vala nodded, moving quickly, her agility making her almost invisible in the shadows. Riley focused on the task at hand, keeping watch as the team continued to provide cover fire. The quiet tension in the air was thick with anticipation, but Riley couldn't afford to lose focus. Moments later, a faint beep echoed in the silence. Vala had done it. The door's unlocked. We're in, she said, her voice calm but her eyes alert. Riley wasted no time. He gestured for the team to follow, and they swiftly entered the command center. Inside, the space was cold and sterile, illuminated by the pale glow of holographic consoles and screens flickering with unreadable data. Riley's gaze swept across the room, his instincts telling him that they were on the verge of discovering something crucial. But nothing could have prepared him for what came next. "Riley," Vala's voice trailed off, disbelief in her tone. He turned to see her standing before a massive display screen, a map of the galaxy lit up in front of her. At the center of the map was a cluster of systems, human colonies, and at the heart of those systems was Earth. Riley's stomach sank. "This can't be right," Vala said, staring at the screen in confusion. "Why would they target Earth? Why target humanity?" Riley moved closer, his heart pounding in his chest. The map was unmistakable. It was showing Earth's location, surrounded by several key points marked with red flags, systems that had been recently attacked or destabilized. And there was one chilling fact that stood out. Earth's defenses weren't listed. "Why is Earth so exposed?" Riley asked, his voice a whisper of disbelief. "Because someone wants to expose it," a cold voice answered from behind him. Riley whirled around, rifle raised, but he froze when he saw the figure standing in the doorway. A tall, armored figure, their face hidden beneath a black helmet, stepped into the room. The figure's presence radiated authority and cold calculation. "You've been following the wrong trail," the figure said, their voice modulated by the helmet's distortion. This is about more than just your precious resistance. It's about resetting the balance of power." Riley's mind raced as he tried to place the voice, but it wasn't familiar. It didn't matter. He had to take this enemy down. This was personal. "Who the hell are you?" Riley growled, stepping forward. His rifle was still trained on the figure, but something in the back of his mind told him that this wasn't just some random enemy. The figure paused, the weight of their words hanging in the air. "You call yourselves Marines," they said, their tone mocking. "But you are nothing more than a symbol of chaos, a relic of a dead age." Suddenly, the helmeted figure took a step forward, and the room's atmosphere shifted. The walls seemed to pulse with tension. Riley's eyes narrowed. "You think you're the only ones who can break the models," the figure continued. "You think you've rewritten the rules of war. You're not the only ones who can think outside the box. You're not the only ones who can win without following the rules." Riley's fists clenched. "I don't care who you are," he spat, "but if you think you can play God with Earth, you're making a mistake." The figure tilted their head, a faint chuckle escaping their lips. "A mistake? Oh no, what you're witnessing, Riley Carter, is just the beginning. The galaxy's balance is shifting, and humanity's role in that shift is already determined. You've just been too blind to see it." Riley's mind was reeling, but something clicked. Something felt wrong about all of this. Whoever this was, they weren't just another enemy. They knew far too much about Earth, about humanity's role in the galaxy. They weren't here just to fight. They were here to control. "You don't control anything," Riley said, his voice low but deadly. "We'll fight you until we're dead, and we'll fight even after that. Humanity doesn't quit." The figure's eyes narrowed behind the dark visor, and for a moment, Riley saw the faintest flicker of something, a mix of fear and calculation. "Then let's see how long your will lasts against forces you cannot understand." Before Riley could respond, the figure turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving only a silence that hung heavier than before. The team was still, their faces a mix of disbelief and anger. The war wasn't just about resources anymore. It was about something deeper, something more dangerous. "We need to find out who they are, and fast," Riley said, his voice steady with resolve. "We will," Vala said, stepping forward. "But for now, we've only got one choice: survive. We're not done yet." Riley nodded, his mind already spinning with the next move. This fight was far from over, and the truth about what humanity was truly up against was only just beginning to reveal itself. Riley's mind was a storm of thoughts as he stood there, the strange figure's words echoing in his head. He had faced many battles, many foes, but this was different. This was personal, and it was clear the enemy had a far deeper strategy than they had originally thought. "Riley, we need to figure out where they're coming from," Vala said, breaking the silence that had settled over the room. "We can't just sit here and wait for them to make their next move." Riley turned to face her, his gaze steady but troubled. "I know, but we're missing something. This isn't just a military operation. Whoever these people are, they've been planning this for a long time. They know how to make us chase shadows." He stepped toward the massive map still flickering on the display, his eyes scanning the highlighted systems, Earth and its colonies, all strategically placed under threat. But there was something off about the way the enemy had positioned themselves. They were moving too deliberately, and that meant one thing. "They want Earth in the center of this," Riley muttered, his eyes narrowing as he studied the map. "They're baiting us and we're walking right into their trap." Vala's face was grim. "And how do you suggest we get out of it?" Riley didn't respond right away. He couldn't let the weight of their enemy's plan crush them. They had to think beyond the obvious. That was the only advantage they had left. The Earth Marines didn't play by the rules. They weren't going to beat their enemy by following the same strategies everyone else relied on. "We don't get out of it," Riley said after a beat. "We turn it around." He turned back to Drax, who was hunched over the data pad, still scanning for any anomalies in the enemy's systems. "Anything." Drax looked up from his screen, his feline eyes narrowed with concentration. "They're good. They've hidden their operations well, but there's a glitch in their communications, just a small one. It's not much, but it's something." Riley's eyes lit up. "Where?" Drax tapped a few buttons on the data pad, bringing up a new set of coordinates. "Here. It's a relay station near the Hattie Prime system. It's been abandoned for years. The signal was weak, but it's active now. Someone's using it." Vala's eyes widened. "You think they're using it as a staging ground?" Riley nodded. "That's where we hit them. We'll get to the relay station, find out who's behind this, and shut it down before they can launch any more attacks on Earth." The team nodded in agreement, preparing for the next phase of their operation. The clock was ticking, and the enemy wasn't about to give them time to catch up. The journey to the Hattie Prime system was uneventful, but the tension in the air was thick. Riley's team moved silently, each of them focused on their mission. The cold, sterile environment of the ship felt suffocating, but there was no room for distractions. They had to get in, find the source of the glitch, and get out before reinforcements arrived. The station itself loomed ahead, a vast structure floating in the emptiness of space. The relay was massive, a dark monolith against the backdrop of the stars. Its once glowing panels were dimmed, its systems outdated, but the faint flicker of life inside told Riley that someone had brought it back online. "Everyone stay sharp," Riley ordered as they docked with the station. The team readied their weapons, making sure they were prepared for whatever they might encounter. As they made their way through the station's corridors, Riley couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The silence was almost deafening, the hum of the station's old systems the only sound. Every creak and groan of the metal walls made Riley's senses tingle, but he refused to let the fear take hold. The enemy was here. He just had to find them. They reached the central hub of the station, where the communications relay was located. It was a massive room, filled with old machinery and flickering screens. The air was cold and stale, and the smell of rust and dust lingered in the atmosphere. Riley's eyes swept over the room, his rifle raised, scanning for any movement. "Ready," he whispered to his team. Vala nodded, her rifle at the ready. "Let's do this." They split up, moving to different positions to cover all angles. Riley moved toward the main console, his hands working quickly to access the system. The code was outdated, but Drax's earlier analysis had given them the tools they needed to break through. As the system crackled to life, the screens flickered, revealing more data, encrypted files, strategic maps, and encrypted communications. It was clear now that the enemy had been planning a full-scale operation. "Got it," Riley muttered as the system came online. He quickly scanned through the files, his eyes narrowing as he saw something that made his blood run cold. "This isn't just about Earth. They've been sabotaging entire systems, destabilizing planets to create chaos. It's bigger than we thought." Vala's voice crackled in his earpiece. "We've got company. Get out of there, Riley." Riley cursed under his breath. They had found them. A blast of gunfire echoed through the station as enemy soldiers stormed the room, their weapons trained on Riley and his team. The figure leading them was tall and menacing, their face obscured by a black helmet. Riley's heart sank as he recognized the silhouette. "It's you," Riley muttered, stepping back as the enemy commander advanced. "You didn't think it would be this easy, did you?" the commander said, their voice cold and calculating. "You should have stayed away." Riley gritted his teeth. "We don't run, not from you, not from anyone." The commander's eyes narrowed as they raised their weapon. "Then you'll die just like the rest of them." The sound of weapons charging filled the air, a haunting hum of energy building just before the first shot rang out. Riley ducked instinctively, the blast whizzing over his head, barely missing. His mind raced as the commander's soldiers flanked the room, taking cover behind the old machines and terminals. They were closing in fast. "Form up," Riley shouted, raising his rifle and firing a quick burst toward the approaching soldiers. The shots hit their targets, sending two of them sprawling to the floor, but there were more. Always more. The enemy was relentless, coordinated in a way that only a well-trained, calculating force could be. Riley ducked behind a terminal, the crackle of static from the comms just a distant reminder of the danger closing in. He could feel the weight of his team's survival on his shoulders now. There was no room for hesitation. "Vala Drax, get to the lower levels," Riley ordered, his voice sharp and urgent. "We need to disrupt their reinforcements. I'll hold them off here." Vala looked at him, hesitation in her eyes. She had always been one to lead from the front. "Riley, we're not leaving you." "Do it," he cut her off. "The mission's bigger than us. Get to the relay and make sure no backup comes. I'll deal with the rest." Reluctantly, Vala nodded. "We'll be back in 5 minutes. Don't do anything stupid." Riley grinned, even though he knew the joke was half-hearted. When have I ever? The team split off, moving with practiced precision as they dodged enemy fire and sprinted to the lower levels. Riley, alone now in the central hub, focused his attention back on the commander, still lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The enemy's footsteps echoed through the halls, their deliberate, calm pace betraying their confidence. But Riley was no rookie. He had fought in worse conditions, against odds that seemed insurmountable, and the Earth Marines didn't know how to quit. As the enemy commander stepped into full view, their cold eyes locked onto Riley's. The helmeted figure stood tall, their presence imposing as they slowly advanced, unfazed by the gunfire raining in their direction. "You're too late," the commander said, voice dripping with menace. "We've already won. Earth's fate is sealed." Riley's pulse quickened, the tension in his muscles coiling. "Not while I'm breathing," he spat, raising his rifle and unloading a series of shots toward the commander. But the figure didn't flinch. Instead, a sudden pulse of energy shot out from their arm, creating a force field that absorbed the blasts, pushing them back with brutal force. Riley stumbled, barely keeping his footing as he was knocked off balance. The commander's voice turned cold, almost pitying. "You can't win, human. We've studied your tactics. We know how you fight. You've been playing into our hands from the start." Riley's chest tightened. This was the moment, the point of no return. "Maybe, but you don't understand Earth Marines." With a growl, Riley dove to the side, taking cover behind a large machine. He moved fast, using his environment to his advantage, something the enemy clearly hadn't prepared for. He wasn't just going to shoot and pray. No, Riley was going to make them regret ever underestimating him. The enemy commander stood tall, a silent threat in the room, watching as Riley's team continued to make their escape into the depths of the station. The moment they were out of sight, the commander's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, a flicker of frustration passed over their otherwise impassive face. "You're stubborn, I'll give you that," the commander said softly, before raising their weapon again, aiming for Riley's position. But Riley was already moving. He wasn't going to let himself be caught off guard again. He leaped from cover, catching the commander off balance for just a moment. Riley surged forward, closing the distance in a heartbeat. With a grunt of effort, he slammed his shoulder into the commander's chest, throwing them back against a console. The commander's helmet cracked slightly, revealing the faintest hint of a smirk beneath it. "You think your humanity gives you strength?" they hissed. "You're nothing but a tool, one that will soon be crushed." Riley's grip tightened on his weapon, the familiar weight of his rifle grounding him. He knew one thing for certain now. This wasn't about tactics anymore. This was about proving humanity's place in the galaxy, not as an anomaly, not as a mistake, but as something unstoppable. In that moment, Riley acted without hesitation. He grabbed a nearby explosive device from his belt, quickly arming it, and hurled it at the base of the console. The blast shook the entire room, and as the energy from the explosion spread, Riley dove for cover, using the chaos to his advantage. The commander was momentarily thrown back, their shield flickering in the intense shockwave. Riley didn't waste the opportunity. With a sharp move, he disarmed them, the weapon clattering to the floor as he pinned the commander to the ground. "Now," Riley said through gritted teeth, his voice hard and unyielding, "let's see what happens when the models break." Before the commander could react, the air around them began to hum, a low, eerie sound that intensified as the station's core began to falter. Riley didn't wait to figure out what was happening. The explosion had triggered something in the station's power grid. It was unstable. Everything was about to collapse. "Riley, we've got the relay. We're heading back." Vala's voice rang through his comms. "Get out of there now." Riley's heart thudded in his chest as he realized what was happening. The station was about to implode. He didn't have much time. He knocked the commander out cold with the butt of his rifle before sprinting for the exit. The walls of the station began to crack and groan as the entire facility started to break down, but Riley didn't look back. He knew that the mission was still alive. The battle wasn't over, not by a long shot. As he reached the dock, Vala and Drax were already waiting. The rest of the team was in motion, their ship powered up and ready to leave. But Riley's mind was still on Earth. The fight wasn't just for this station or for Zelthar 6, it was for humanity's place in the galaxy. As the ship's engines roared to life, lifting off into the darkness of space, Riley looked out at the burning remains of the station. There would be more battles, more enemies, more struggles. But if there was one thing he knew now, it was this. Humanity wasn't just an unpredictable force in the galaxy. Humanity was a reckoning, and the universe had better start preparing for it.